It seems like everyone's fixated on killing turkeys right now, but to be honest, I'm still dreaming about big bucks. The work I put in the spring in the past several years, and I'm sure in many years to come, has led directly to me killing big bucks come hunting season. This year, I don't expect to be any different. Come along with me on this scouting trip as I show you the process I go through, step by step, once I find a mature buck bed and lead it towards producing a successful setup.
I'm in an isolated patch of cover, and you hear me talk about all the time how crucial these isolated patches of cover are in this marsh country. And I'm gonna break down a bed here that is a buck bed that's got sign around it, and I'll tell you every bit of information I'm gathering from the sign he's leaving here. I'm gonna tell you what direction I think he's coming from, what time of year I think he's bedding here, what's the age and size class of the buck that's here, why is he bedding here, and then how would I hunt it if this is a bed that I would in fact hunt. So I'll give you every bit of information I can. I'll show you the whole story going on right here. First, I want to give you a feel for what the surrounding cover is like, and what we're dealing with is a little patch of willows here, mostly flatter marsh grass, and then we come into cattails right there, and surrounding him is a rim of cattails, and then most of the way that he's looking is actually open marsh grass. Now this marsh grass is going to get high enough that it will cover a deer come season, but it's not quite going to be high enough that a deer standing is going to be concealed until he's into those cattails right there. So the first step that I often talk about is where is he bedded, and obviously step one accomplished right here. We can tell that this is a buck bed. There's a clear outline of his back right here. There's some poop in it, which is very, very common for bucks to stand up and relieve themselves throughout the day, especially when they're spending a long time in these beds in pressured areas like this, and they're not necessarily traveling a whole lot. You'll often see any kind of feces and stuff like that in the bed. But first step accomplished, we found where he's bedding. Now the second step is we're gonna gauge the size of this deer, we're gonna gauge its maturity, and that's gonna be based on a couple things. That's gonna be based on the intelligence, and it's gonna be based on the sign that's around here. First, if we're looking at intelligence here, we're gonna look at how vulnerable that deer is. And there's gonna be another layer to this of escape route that a lot of people don't really consider, or at least vocalize when they're talking about the intelligence of a buck bed. So right now I actually have you sitting in the buck bed, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of perspective here. So you're about the height right now that a buck would be when he's bedding in here. And you can see that behind him, fairly covered, especially when we think this is, which is gonna be the early season because of how tall we need this grass to be and the leaves that we need to be on this branch here in this bush behind us, this willow bush behind us, in order for him to be shaded and concealed here. But if you look back, fairly covered from that direction, which is good, but it starts to get fairly open here. This grass is gonna be tall enough to conceal him laying down, but not when he's standing up. And you can see that he's got a good amount of area that he can actually have danger reach him from, or danger approach him from, before he gets a good monitor on it. Now, while it's gonna be loud, we do expect that with his back to this wall of cover right here, that's where he wants that wind direction coming from. And that's actually how this bed rounds out, where his back is rounded with the wind coming over his back in this direction. He's looking out to the opening. Now, the way I'm going to dock him here, as far as maturity points goes, is I don't really think that he's got a great secure exit route where he's not exposed. The closest exit into cover is this cattails right here, and he's still got to take a few bounds into fairly open territory in order to get into good cover. So I don't think this deer is bedding with a lot of experience and a lot of maturity, just based on how he needs to escape this bed and how many different angles something can come at him from. Now, if he was at the tip of these cattails and he could see everything out in this direction and only have his wind coming back over his back, then he could monitor things successfully by looking even in just one direction. He could monitor everything coming from one single area, and then using the wind, he could monitor the entire other direction. So that would be a more intelligent setup for bedding. The cover doesn't really line up for it in this case, but docking him a few points as far as maturity goes because of the intelligence of the bedding. I don't think he has a great escape route, and I think he's vulnerable from too many directions. Next thing that we're gonna go by for gauging the size of this deer, criteria number 2 after we identify the bedding, is what is the size of the sign? And the first things first, are there any tracks? Now, I've trampled through this a bit, but I can tell you as I came up, there aren't really any tracks in here. Much is the case very often with this marsh grass kind of bedding scenario. But there's no tracks to go off of, so we're gonna look at the size of the bed. And it's hard to tell on video, but it rounds out like this, and it extends to just around 4 feet, probably 3.5 feet long. So this is not really the size that we would picture for a mature buck. This is like a good 2.5-year-old, 1.5-year-old buck. That's kind of the size of bed we're looking at, and that's a great indicator, but say you can't go off of that. The next thing we're gonna look at is what's the room for his rack in here. There really is a good amount of room in this case. He's not shoved back into a corner, so there is the potential for him to have a good rack, and you can tell that he's snapping little branches that his rack or he is browsing on, but anything that's kind of colliding with him, he's clearing out. So if you have an area that's super choked down, but you have a lot of brush cleared, kind of where the deer's head would be, you can kind of expect that deer to have a little bit bigger rack. Now, the next thing we're looking at is the sign he's leaving in this bed. So this sign right here is deep back into this brush, which you can tell that he's using this little brush area not as just passing and rubbing as he passes, but he's using it when he's bedding and taking his time in here. So this is kind of him laying claim to this area, and honestly, we're not seeing a whole lot of great size or height to this. Now, these branches are extremely easy to bend. These are really weak kind of saplings here. He's not getting up very high, even with the ability to bend them over, and he's hitting really low when he has no obstruction. So when he's over here and he's able to rub kind of wherever he wants, his average height is low. So where he can best apply his force is fairly low. So I'm thinking that that's a little bit younger deer. Now, he did snap off a little branch in here, but again, deer are really powerful animals. It's pretty easy for them to twist things up and snap them off. If we got something a little bit bigger than that, I'd be more interested in it. But from the perspective of the size of this sign, I don't think this is a very mature deer. So the next thing we're going to determine is when is he bedded here. So from what we've seen here, we've got rubs. So obviously he's hardhorn. He's not bedding here in early August or July or anything like that. So we know that this is some kind of very likely during the season bedding, of course. But what we're looking at as far as cover is when we're seeing this grass down, which is going to happen around November, is when this grass is going to start to flatten out. These cattails are going to start to thin. We can tell that there's really not enough cover for even an immature buck to feel comfortable bedding here. So we're going to rule out kind of a prime rut bedding here. Now, I also think that in the very early season would be nice for him to bed here, but you have to think in these scenarios, why is this deer here? What is he doing? Why is this spot, instead of all these other patches, why is this spot the one that he chose to bed in? What we see here is we actually got a major trail coming right here, rounding out this corner, leading into some doe bedding over on that far edge there. We've got another major trail traveling from this large patch of trees here that's got doe bedding that's fairly open. There's lots of beds in there of different sizes. And we've got another major trail coming right here. And we actually have the predominant wind working with us today, blowing right in my face from that doe bedding. We can tell that right where these two major trails intersect, right where they cross, is the side that he's laying sign on. This is where he's twisting up branches and stuff like that. Now, most guys would look at this patch of willow brush and would say, well, willow leaves fall off pretty early, so this must be an early season bedding. Now, I would challenge that because I, coming into the marshes this year, not familiar with some of this type of cover, recorded when I was seeing all of this willow brush drop this year, so I can get a feel for when the shaded cover is still there. And I noticed that on October 24th and 23rd is when this willow brush started to turn yellow, and after that is when it actually started to fall off. So we could have a buck in here with full shade all the way into the pre-rut, deep into the pre-rut when those first does are actually coming into heat. So what I think is going on here with this predominant wind coming from doe bedding, with the major trails crossing right by this location, and him having a slightly open view, easy to monitor things coming from that direction, I think what he's doing here is, due to his immaturity, he's putting himself right on the corner of all the travel because he wants to get first dibs on whatever comes down. He wants to gather whatever information he can about these does, and he's actually putting himself a little bit at risk to do it. And that's why he's marking so much sign over here, is because he's trying to let any doe know that's coming by that he's here. He's keeping tabs on them. He's trying to lay claim to this little area. And honestly, he's not going to get much competition from mature bucks because this is a very vulnerable position. So what this deer is doing, I believe, is bedding in here in the early season. I would give it probably October 5th 15th. He's in the pre-rut, October 15th to maybe 22nd, somewhere around there. And he's making a lot of sign, getting jazzed up because he can smell all these does upwind of him. And he's trying to be in a place where he can monitor their presence coming by and their travel and decide that if there's one actually coming in heat up there, he's going to go travel over there and try to mess with her when it comes dark. So we've established where is this buck bedding. We've established its maturity. We established why he's bedded here and what time of year we think he's using it. The next step is where is he going? Where is he going after he is bedded here? Now, I'm assuming with that wind coming this way, if he's bedding here and the wind direction is coming in his face, I'm assuming he's going to travel that direction to go try and harass some does that are over there. Now, if the wind's coming from this direction, which I would expect a more mature buck to be bedded with, coming from there, I would expect him to probably follow downwind wherever he's at so he can go pursue the does and leave in the area that, in the direction that he's most comfortable exiting because he's been monitoring it all day. Now, his plans might get switched up if he does have a doe cross one of these trails or come by him during the day, but it's not very likely, especially when the does are getting harassed quite a bit, for them to be traveling out in the open like this where they're vulnerable as well, especially given that this is when a lot of the hunting pressure has already hit some of these areas of the marsh. So the direction that he's traveling is going to be basically, I'm assuming, downwind, not because deer always exit their bed downwind, but because he is here to smell what is in these other doe bedding areas, and he's going to pursue whatever he's been monitoring as far as does go in that direction. Now, if there's a doe that popped into heat using this bedding area, he's probably going there first. If there's a doe that popped into heat using this bedding area, he's probably going there first, regardless of wind direction. But we know that he is here to monitor when those does are there. He's going to travel in the direction of where the does are at right now. So with everything we've discussed, this is not really a deer that would bed in this place at the time of year that I think he's bedding there. It's not really one that I would pursue. I don't think this is a very mature buck. Now, it might be a good 2.5-year-old, and if he repeats next year, he'll be 3.5. Might be a good deer, but this is not one that I would personally be interested in pursuing. That being said, if he's exiting in this direction or he's exiting in this direction, where are my opportunities to kill him? Now, he is not going to get to that cover in daylight if he's anything that I deem worth shooting, and he might get down here in daylight if he's something that I deem worth shooting. I basically, as you can see, and is common with marshes like this, I only have a couple options in this area. I have one tree here, I have one tree there, and I'm going to go look at those trees and see if I can actually get a viable shot to where I think he's traveling. So already we've ruled out, I can't hunt him if the wind's coming from this direction. That is not where I think I'm going to be able to get him to go after he's exiting this bed because of the reasons he's bedding there. And it's not an area that I think I'm going to be able to shoot him in daylight from one of the available trees to set up in. So we've already ruled out that even though he might be using this bed when the wind's coming from that direction, I don't think I'm going to be able to kill him when he is. So following this trail down, we're working this edge. You can see this defined trail right here. This is the edge he's staying in right here. And now, from right around here in these trees, we can tell this is our first opportunity to get a shot on this deer. That's maybe 25 yards away. Right past here, see if we can get a good view of it. Right there is where that setup is. So the next thing we're determining here is where can I set up to kill this deer? Now, given the things that we've discussed, I don't really think that this is a deer that I would be really interested in killing. I think he's in a vulnerable position, and just enough so that I don't think it would be a mature buck bedding in this situation. But let's say it was, and how am I going to get, for the sake of learning, on this deer set up to where I can kill him? How am I going to beat his nose and be out of his area of comfortability that he can monitor? How am I going to be close enough that I catch him in daylight while still giving him the advantages that he needs in order to bed there? So I'm going to zoom in on that bed right now. You can see there's my tripod right there. That's the height that I expect this deer to be bedded at, just below the top of that tripod. Now, with this grass a little bit higher, I don't think he's going to see me coming in here. One of the things we've determined is if he's exiting from there over to this patch of trees, so one, he's already smelling in the direction I would have to set up, and two, he's not going to reach me in daylight. I'm way too far from where he's at. So what I need is the wind coming over his back like a more intelligent deer would bed anyways, and I need him to exit downwind because he's smelling for does in this bedding area down here, and I'm gonna have to intercept him on the way while not letting my wind or sound or sight get to him. And my first available tree is gonna be this willow right here, this slender willow right there. Now what that's gonna do is this willow is still gonna have leaves on it, as we talked about earlier. That's gonna conceal my sight. So it'll be just out of sight of him. And what I would do right now is I would actually climb up in my sticks and see if I can see that tripod sitting in there. I would put a hat or something on that tripod so I can see it clearly. And I would see if I can get, how high I can get up that tree before I clear this grass and make myself visible to him. Now that being the nearest setup, right here is the trail that he comes along, and it reaches out to about 25 yards right here. This is my closest tree. I can creep through this stuff when it's not completely dried out yet. I can creep through quiet enough and I can get to that tree I know without enough sound, without my scent blowing in, while making him still comfortable that he's monitoring this doe bedding that he wants to travel to. And I'm not inside of him. I'm completely beating his senses and letting him still feel comfortable that he's monitoring this whole area successfully. Now this deer being a little more immature, it's a little bit easier to break down his game and kind of get in on him because he's not bedding with that intelligence that we would expect a mature buck to be bedding. So this might be a little bit more of a conundrum if this was a more mature deer that we're after here. It might be a little bit harder to find this setup. But now we've found exactly where we need to be in order to target him. Step is access, so I can access from pretty much any direction here. Now, given that, I know that I want the wind coming from here, so I'm not gonna access anywhere where I'm gonna bump him from my scent, or I'm gonna bump the does that he's trying to wind. So what I wanna do is I wanna come from a crosswind. I don't wanna come downwind of him because he's gonna be looking downwind. I don't wanna come from this direction because I'm gonna be extremely loud coming through the cattails and brush. And I do wanna come in this direction because I'm not gonna be bumping the does. My wind is not going to the does, it's not going to him. I'm not in sight of him, and I can keep my tree between me and him. So this is actually the direction that I would pursue this deer in. This is my access direction. Now, the next thing I look at is where is the other hunter pressure? This is step 7 of 8. Where is the other hunter pressure coming from? And honestly, what I'm thinking, what typically happens here, is they're gonna be along these edges and these open hardwoods and things like that. This, maybe not this patch of willows here, but they're gonna be along these edges over here. So I'm gonna be monitoring whether I believe someone has come in here and is hunting it. I'm gonna be looking at access. I'm gonna be seeing if someone's parking in the lots that are over here and over here and over here. And I'm gonna see if I think someone's pinching in on him and habitually hunting that before I decide that this is a good area to be at. Basically, I know that this deer is already monitoring the hunter pressure if he's bedded here. So in this situation, I'm not super worried about where other hunters are gonna be because there's one tree I need to get to in order to kill him. And as long as I can't see someone in these trees here, I know I'm still in the game on him. Now, if this were a really special buck, my last step is how is he gonna adjust once this pressure has hit him? And now right now he's in a pretty isolated bedding scenario. He's isolated out there, so he's not gonna get more isolated and more protected from this cover if a lot of the pressure has already reached him here. So what I'd expect is him to actually bump even further out and maybe make a dramatic shift in this situation. If he's busted off of an isolated patch of cover like this, he's probably not going to the mainlands where all that pressure came from. I don't think he's gonna do that. I think he's actually gonna shift further out into this point, and once he can't take it anymore, he's gonna break out into a different bedding area because he's already pushed a little bit further back by this time of year. He's off of those mainlands because the early season pressure's already pushed him off. And I think that he's actually gonna make the adjustment here if he gets bumped and if he's a really special buck. And if I do wanna get back on him, I now need to go scout in this direction and figure out where he'll go when that pressure that's a little bit closer to lots has already impacted him. So I hope you guys enjoyed that breakdown of this bed right here. This is exactly the process I go through when I scout all the time. And again, just to recap, it's an 8-step process. Step 1 is gonna be, where is the deer bedded? Step 2, what is the size class of the deer that's bedded here? What's his maturity? What's his age? And how big is that rack that he has got? Step 3, when is he bedded here? When can I target him? When is he actually gonna be using this area? Because they don't use them all throughout the year in most cases. Step 4, what's his travel direction? Where is he going and how can I target him on the way out? And step 5 will then be, where can I set up on him? Once I found out where I can set up on him, step 6, how can I access that? Where must I come from in order to make him feel like he's safe but actually protrude into that area where he is vulnerable. Step 7, where is the other hunter pressure coming from? What are the other hunters doing? Has he been pushed here by other hunters? And then step 8, how is he going to adjust to other hunter pressure? And that's something I do when I really believe it's a very special deer. How do I need to adjust if he gets pushed by someone else or myself? And where do I need to now go scout to find out where is that bed he shifts to after he's been impacted here? So those are the 8 steps. This is just a quick breakdown video of this whole process that I go through scouting. I really appreciate everyone that's taken the time to stick with me throughout this off season and watch all my content. I really enjoy making stuff for you guys, and I can't wait to make some announcements on what's soon to come. There's a lot of different things I've been working on with a lot of different people, and I'm extremely happy with the direction that this is going and everything in the outdoors is going for me. So I'm very excited to bring you guys along. I appreciate you sticking around through this whole video. If you could, drop a like and subscribe or comment. Tell me something you want to see in some future videos or ask any questions you'd like. Thank you guys very much.